3, 4, and a little bit of 5. So page 2 through 5 is what you should have out of your big packet, or that's all I printed out for today. There are a couple big changes. We'll get to the last page. I'll again remind you about what I want you to know about cranial nerves in a moment. But first, pretty much everything looks pretty good here. But as I was looking at our models and the way your book breaks things down, on page 4 at the very top, it says brain stem, and just below that it says midbrain. Go ahead and cross that out. The midbrain exists. There's sort of a contentious division of the brain that tends to just confuse students a lot. And the note, understanding the midbrain right now is just not really worth your time. That's kind of why I'm eliminating it. So I will not ask you, you can read about it still and start learning about it, but I'm not going to ask you. Midbrain will not be a correct answer on any quiz or exam I ever give you. So I will just refer to it as the brain stem. There's a small subregion called the midbrain, but it's not visually distinct, and it's not worth your time at this point. So I'm just going to eliminate that from our curriculum, but feel free to still read about it and learn about it. If we move down on that same page, right in the middle, there's caudate nucleus, lentiniform nucleus, and hippocampus. All 3 of those you can go ahead and cross out. They are what are called subcortical nuclei. Most people call them basal nuclei. You'll get those. You may or may not get those depending on what you go into, but the nuclei, we'll look at a picture of them in a second, and I'll bring it up again, but basically they're really important for movement. So if you ever go into something that's focusing on the musculoskeletal system, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, things like that, a lot of the times when you see symptoms from neurological issues that cause musculoskeletal symptoms, it usually is attacking the basal ganglia. It's usually a breakdown of those areas because they're involved in motor function. And so a lot of your brain is actually for motor function because moving is a really important thing for us. But they're really hard to see. It's kind of a higher level neurology thing. So again, those 3 terms, caudate nucleus, lentiniform nucleus, and hippocampus, you can go ahead and cross off completely. And don't get too caught up in the basal nuclei. I'm going to leave the term there because I want you to read about it a little bit, but I'm not probably going to ask you any questions about it. It's just, again, kind of beyond the scope for the first week. All right, so that's it for eliminating and crossing out stuff. If you go to the back page, page 5, you got a chart there. So this is your first chance. I guess I'll just talk about cranial nerves first because I got your eyes on that part of the page. So again, let me zoom out so you can see the whole page a little better. So below the PowerPoint, well actually there's 2 PowerPoint. One PowerPoint is full of cranial nerve stuff. This one's full of brain stuff in general. And in between them is basically, I took this chart and filled it out for you. Because there's some conflicting information out there as to like whether or not one particular nerve is motor, is sensory, or is mixed. And I don't want you guys coming and bringing in different sources. We need to all be on the same page, literally, when it comes to what I want you to know. So the information, this chart, you can just cross out the chart. You don't need to fill it out or anything. I've already done it for you. So let me make it bigger for you and just show me so that I can show you what I need you to know. So the cranial nerves. A bunch of them. Let me show you this picture too. The cranial nerves is what I'm talking about here in the first place. So if you look at the brain, this human brain, we're looking from under it. So we're looking up. And so what you have is a series of nerves that come off of the brain stem here, come off of the diencephalon, and off of actually the cerebral cortex as well. So there's a number of different nerves, all highlighted in red boxes here. Cranial nerves are really important because they're a diagnostic tool. So when you're going in and you're following people's eyes, you're asking them to look one direction, and you ask them to look a different direction. You're actually testing 2 different cranial nerves. So if they can do that, then you know that at least the basic motor function of that particular nerve, like the oculomotor nerve or the abducens nerve, those are 2 separate nerves, but if you can move your eyes both directions, those seem to be working fine. So you can also test for taste sensation in the tongue to test for one particular cranial nerve. So that's why these are important. These are diagnostic tools here. Because they are in your brain. They're usually confined to functions of things that go on in the head, but there's things like the accessory nerve down here that's actually motor function for your trapezius and your sternocleidomastoid as well. So if you ever had someone put their hands on your shoulders and ask you to shrug, they're testing the function of the accessory nerve. And so they're really simple, quick ways to see whether or not you have cranial nerve damage. And so this is why today we're just starting to learn their names, learn their basic function, not their specific function. So by basic function, I mean whether they're motor, whether they're sensory, or whether they're mixed. And then the other thing I want you to start learning is just what holes they go through in order to get to the eye. So these holes are going to be familiar to you, hopefully, because they're holes in the skull, like the cribriform plate. That's what the olfactory nerve travels through. So let me just show you how this is broken down. So if we start with cranial nerve number 1, that's the olfactory nerve. So the olfactory nerve is their shortest one, actually. They're in your nose, right under the ethmoid bone. And they are actually free synapses at the end that are actually binding to chemicals so we can smell stuff. We'll get into how smell works in 2 weeks. But the nerve that's carrying the information about olfaction, also known as smell, is called the olfactory nerve. It also has a number. That's number 1. It's the first one. And its origin is from the olfactory epithelium, so that's where it comes from. And then its function is very simple. It's just sensory. Not doing anything else but sensing smell. And then the hole or the foramen that it travels through are really it's really the cribriform plate that it punctures a bunch of different times to get through. So then our second nerve is the optic nerve. So optic nerve is nerve number 2. It begins, so this is what I mean by begins. It doesn't mean like physically begins, it's where the signal begins from. So in this case, it's kind of straightforward because it's the retina. It's inside of your eyeballs. It's sensing light coming into your eyes. So that's where the beginning is the actual retina. It's a sensory one also, really straightforward. And then it's coming in through what are called the optic canals. So if you remember those in the sphenoid bone, that's where the big fat optic nerves are coming in from both the left and the right side. So that's all the information I want you to know about these. You don't have to be very, very specific about what their functions are. So if I ask you the function, it's either sensory. For oculomotor, this one kind of gives it away, right? It's a good name, oculomotor. It's the third one. Its origin is technically the midbrain, so I know I just said I won't ask you about the midbrain. That is the most specific location. I would like you to just know the midbrain for this one. You don't need to really know where it is, but that will be the easiest for you to remember that because it is the most specific answer. So in your future, it'll be good if you attach the midbrain to that oculomotor. But you could say brainstem, and I'd probably give you half credit. So it'll be an easier one, but go with what it says here. And then motor function, so oculomotor. So this is a movement of the eye. This is also changing the shape of the lens and stuff like that. So it's all motor function. So that's why its function is simply motor. And then its big foramen is actually a fissure. It's that superior orbital fissure. And you'll notice that thing is so big, it's got a lot of things that travel through that. So again, those are all of that's our first 3. It goes on for 12 nerves. I do want you to know, here's the pain in the butt. So nerves are really important for you moving on. All nursing programs expect that you know these by name, that you know them by number, that you know them by basic function, and you know them by foramen. That's why this chart exists. We didn't choose to put this in here. I would just have you guys do tests on nerves if it was really up to me, but this is what they want you to know, so that when you go on to the next step, you're prepared to do this already. And so the one thing I'll point out, and it seems silly, but you do need to know the numbers. And notice the form of numbers that I'm using here. I'm not just a jerk. If it was up to me, I'd eliminate Roman numerals from the earth. But they're used. Your textbooks are going to use them, your lecturers are going to use them. Believe it or not, some medical records will use Roman numerals to refer to the nerves. And it's annoying, I'm sorry, but I do want you to be able to tell me not just the name, but also the Roman numeral and in the Roman numeral form correctly. And it's annoying, I know, but we got to do it. So whenever you write, when I ask you what nerve this is, so I grab a brain stem and there's nerves coming off of it and I ask you what it is, I need you to give me not just the name, but I need you to give me the number as well. In Roman numerals. I'm sorry. I'll be sympathetic if you get it wrong, but it's just what we have to do. All right, so as you notice, the one that we we already talked about motor and we already talked about sensory. That's pretty straightforward. But what mixed means is just that it's both. And so trigeminal nerve, so trigeminal nerve comes up a lot. That's nerve number 5. That's primarily a sensory nerve, but it also has some motor function in your mouth. And so it's mixed, because it does both. So that's what mixed means. And it doesn't give you any indication. I don't care that you know that it's mostly sensory. Just know that it's mixed. Start there. Later on, we'll talk about exactly what it does. But you might hear it come up, like trigeminal neuropathies are like one of the most painful things people can have. It's when the nerve gives a false signal of pain for your face.